This is my great worry about next week's interview on CNN, this town hall that's planned with Donald Trump, because a town hall format live doesn't give the host, in this case, Caitlin Collins, however good she is, and she is, relatively speaking, a pretty good interviewer, it doesn't allow you the time or scope to really dig in or to hold someone to account. I interviewed a Trump advisor called Steve Rogers a few years back, and I did exactly what you said. It's my pinned tweet. If anyone wants to go watch the clip, it went viral, 11 million views, because I just said, we're going to talk about one thing. Trump said there were 6 new US steel mills announced. There weren't, were there? And he said, but there is more steel. I said, that doesn't matter. 6 steel mills. Well, no, 6. And I wouldn't budge. I kept saying, deal with the 6. That's a lie, isn't it? And at one point he says to me, Steve, just ask your next question, because he's not used to someone not moving on. It made him very uncomfortable. And I wish more interviewers would just stick. Less is more. Pick a few subjects and hone in on them.
And what are those subjects right now that are the essential subjects? If you're doing this CNN town hall next week, what do you open with on Donald Trump?
It's a great question. I'm actually doing a segment on my show tomorrow on the questions I would ask Trump if I had to. Look, let me be clear. If I was CNN, I wouldn't be doing this interview. I'm not pro putting Trump on live TV. I'm not pro doing town halls with Trump in front of his supporters. I'm not pro mainstreaming or normalizing a twice impeached former president who incited an insurrection, is currently under indictment in New York and possibly soon will be again elsewhere. But if you're stuck in that situation and you are doing the interview, pick fewer topics with someone like Trump who likes to jump around. Make sure you have follow-up questions, and make sure you're not afraid to go there. On E. Jean Carroll accusing him of rape, a big story right now. He's not even turning up to the trial, let alone testifying. For example, this is a man, Steve, who just a few months ago said we should terminate, quote, terminate parts of the United States Constitution. Now, I know we move on very quickly from Trump stories. We forget. There's so much scandal, we forget. That was a few months ago. I would open with that. On what grounds are you running for president of the United States to protect, preserve, defend the Constitution of the United States when you've openly said that you would terminate the Constitution? Haven't you disqualified yourself from this race?
How should I am with you emotionally, and I think psychologically on the question that if it was my call, I wouldn't have him on TV on the network that I'm running, but he is the Republican frontrunner. Yeah. And increasingly, when you look at the polling spread, he's in that space where he's hovering between frontrunner and presumptive nominee already.
Yes.
We'll see in a few months. So it is possible, though not probable, or even likely, that because he's one of the 2 nominees of the major party, that he could be reelected president again. It's happened before in this country. Grover
Yes.
Cleveland served non-consecutive terms. So how do you rationalize? Here on the one hand is somebody who's lied to the country at least 30,500 times during his first term, is a congenital liar. The pace of lying is getting worse. The conspiracy theories are getting deeper. Yeah. The incitements to violence more pronounced. How do you sort through those 2 things from the perspective of the public interest?
I think you've summed it up very well there. It's the lies, the conspiracy theories, and the violence. All of those things make him an abnormal candidate, not a normal candidate. I was very disturbed to hear the CNN political director tell Vanity Fair this week that we're just going to treat him like any other candidate. That's madness. I thought we'd learned some lessons from 2016 and 2020. Clearly, we haven't. This is a man who incites violence when you give him a bully pulpit and a live mic. This is a man whose own son texted him on January the 6th saying, call this off, condemn them, stop this. Forget liberals. Don Jr. was begging his father not to incite violence on January the 6th. You don't need take my word for it. Take Don Jr. So I think CNN have to be very careful here. Look, what I would say, Steve, is first of all, yeah, he's the front runner. I get that. It's difficult. You don't want to ignore in a 2-party system one of the 2 parties' presidential candidates. I get that. On the other hand, there are ways you can protect yourself. Don't do it live. Don't do it in a town hall format. Why agree to that? CNN has quite a lot of leverage here. I would argue Trump needs CNN more than CNN needs Trump. Trump is the one who can't make any inroads with independent voters, is stuck with his base, and can't win without any kind of expansion. So here's one example for you. Jonathan Karl of ABC News did a very good interview with Kari Lake, who was running for governor of Arizona. I don't think she's conceded yet, Trump style. And he did an interview with her for a Sunday morning show on ABC. And I wouldn't interview Kari Lake because I refuse to interview election deniers. That's just a hygiene test I have on my show. But the way he did it, I admire the way he did it because they pre-taped it. They didn't do it live in the studio. And every time she lied, they cut away. And he said, that's not true. Here are the facts. And then they continued on with the interview. For me, that's a better way of doing things so that the guest is not using a live mainstream platform to gaslight the American public, to bamboozle them, to do what I call in my book, the gish gallop, to overwhelm you with lies at such pace and with such relentlessness that you simply can't fact check or rebut them in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. By the time you fact check lie number 5, Trump's on to lie number 9. That's what's called the gish gallop in debate circles. And he uses it very effectively, very cynically. And a lot of journalists just don't know what to do in that scenario.
The Mehdi Hasan line then appears to be the rules for the Boston Public Meeting House, which were that we will host any opinion in a free society, except for those that are seditious and wish to overtly overthrow the government, which is the starting point of where Trump is from.
100%. 100%. I mean, this is a man who says, let's not forget, Steve, this is a man who says, and I quote, he says, I should be restored to the presidency right now. Like, no candidate for office in the history of the United States has ever uttered that statement. So don't tell me, oh, we'll treat him like any other candidate. This is deranged, anti-democratic, authoritarian madness.
There's a type of gravity to this that I explain it to people like this, that when you look at a political party that is shrinking, which the Republican Party is, it is not so different astronomically than a collapsing star. As that star collapses, it shrinks, but it gets denser and it gets hotter. Right. And in the same way, that party becomes more extreme as it becomes smaller, right? And it spirals down. So one of the fascinating things of this moment, one of the aspects of this era, if you imagine looking back 50 years from now, people will look back and say, well, Trump narrowly wins this election in 2016, shocks everybody. But then after that, electorally, the price of Trump has been exceedingly high for Republicans everywhere across the country. It is likely to be so next time. Now, they can't move on from Donald Trump, whether it's motivated by a fear of Trump, a fear of his voters, a fear of the primary process, whatever it may be. How do you think about that? With the Republican Party as an institution, I would argue a decaying institution, a collapsing institution, is evidenced by its fidelity to such a man. But how do you explain psychologically in an advanced democratic society, in a two-party system, one of the two parties submitting fully to a cult of personality that, judging by the polls, is going to go right over the cliff in November 24? Why is that happening? How do you explain
it's one of the questions of our time, Steve. And why is it happening here in this way? Because while authoritarianism is a global phenomenon, you've got Orban in Hungary and Putin in Russia and Netanyahu in Israel and Modi in India and Erdogan in Turkey and to an extent Boris Johnson in the UK when he was there. It's a global phenomenon, but the cult of personality, that is unique to America in a way that it doesn't exist anywhere else. Orban, Modi, maybe Modi in India, actually, but very few leaders can call on that kind of support that Trump can call on. And actually, again, to be fair to Modi in India, as much as I loathe Modi's politics, the man is an effective politician, is a smart man. I've always said this, if you're going to have a cult of personality, that's bad enough. But to build a cult of personality around this man, one of the most unqualified, unimpressive, deranged people to ever get near high office. The fact that Trump is at the center of the personality cult will stun me to my grave. But to come back to your point about the Republican Party more broadly, I think there's a mixture of cult of personality, definitely. There's also those people who would give up on Trump tomorrow. They're ready to move on. If he was to retire tomorrow or say, I'm not running, they'd be fine with it. They wouldn't be begging him to run. They'd move on to DeSantis or whoever it is. But while he's there, they're not going to give up on him because it's almost like muscle memory at this point. He's their candidate for a third time. He's run for president twice. I mean, time flies, Steve. He's been on the scene now nearly 10 years. We keep talking about Trump, hostile takeover of the GOP. Yeah, maybe in 2015. This is not a hostile takeover. It's his party. And that's what makes me think that really the historians will look back and say the person who has to really take the blame for this moment that the Republican Party's in, from a Republican perspective, I'm no Republican. I'm happy if they don't win elections. But if you are a Republican and you want to blame someone for your party's travails, you have to blame Mitch McConnell. Because Mitch McConnell has that opportunity in January 2021. There's a small window where people have turned on Trump, genuinely turned on Trump, whether it's disgust, whether it's fear, whether it's anger, whether it's shock. But there's a small window where House and Senate Republicans have turned on Trump, and the party in the country is, whoa, what just happened? And Mitch McConnell cynically allows that moment to go by. Democrats don't move fast enough. Don't even get me started on the Democrats. When the time comes, McConnell delays, obfuscates, drags it out, and then votes against. And that was the moment that he could have finished off Trump. That was the moment. Conviction in the Senate, barred from running for office again. Done. Trump is taken out of the political game by his own party. McConnell doesn't do it. McConnell owns this now. By the way, McConnell now has to deal with the fact that Trump keeps putting dangerous racist threats against his wife. Smallest violin in the world, playing for the McConnell family from here.